And let me turn to the issues around pay for our police officers, which was one of the issues that the Scottish Police Federation wrote about. These negotiations, of course, are ongoing, and it's important that they are given the space to continue, and I hope positively conclude. But if you look again, and this goes directly to the question, Presiding Officer, because it's about the value we attach to policing and the priority we attach to policing. In England and Wales, the lowest starting salary for a police officer is £21,654. In Scotland,
members,
a new police constable.
Sorry, First Minister. Members, we will hear the First Minister. First Minister, if I could ask you to conclude your response.
This is important, Presiding Officer. It is an answer to the question. £21,654, just in case Douglas Ross missed that figure, while in Scotland a new police constable starts on £26,737. Last year, my final point, Presiding Officer, last year officers received a £700 pay uplift and a separate non-consolidated payment of £250 in Scotland. In England and Wales, where the Conservatives in power, the majority of police officers received no increase in pay whatsoever. That's the difference in priority for policing.
Douglas Ross. If you listen to that answer from the First Minister,
If you listen to that answer from the First Minister, it's as if our police officers should be congratulating her for everything she is doing. I'm sorry, that is not the reality out with your bubble of Butte House, First Minister. And clearly, your spinners are working overdrive, because the facts are clear. Police officer numbers in Scotland are now at their lowest levels since 2008. The lowest levels since 2008. And again, in this hard-hitting letter from the Scottish Police Federation, police officers have said, this is the police officers that the First Minister is speaking about, they have said that all they see from the government are self-congratulatory narratives that disguise reality. And we have seen it all over again today. Now, the First Minister mentioned pay. The Scottish Police Federation described the SNP government's latest pay offer as derisory. They say, and this is a direct quote, officers are incandescent at the current pay officer. They are beyond angry at how insulting it is. And I think they will be even more insulted to have heard the First Minister's response. In response to the government's lowball offer, Scottish Police Federation members will take action from 5 p.m. tomorrow. The Federation said this morning it is the most overt demonstration of action by our members in more than 100 years. Has the Government considered the impact on frontline policing and public safety from their decision to make such a low offer to our police officers?
First Minister.
The other point we should recognise, of course, Presiding Officer, is that police officers, like nurses, like doctors, like everybody across Scotland, is suffering from the cost of living crisis exacerbated by a Conservative government. But let me return to the important issues. And I think anybody can compare the public sector pay offers that are being made in Scotland to those being made by the Conservatives, and again draw conclusions about the higher value we attach to public sector workers here. But let me return to the detail of the questions. I don't expect any police officer or any public sector worker to congratulate the Government. The gratitude and congratulations are entirely from the Government to those working hard across our country. But Douglas Ross is asking me about the value and the priority that we attach to policing, and therefore it is entirely appropriate and indeed necessary for me to point out the facts. The fact that we have a higher number of police officers in Scotland than when this government took office. There are 300 new officers about to be recruited from next month. We are increasing the budget of the police in Scotland, and police officers, generally speaking, are paid more in Scotland than they are elsewhere in the UK. There is a pay negotiation underway. I would fully expect the Scottish Police Federation and any trade union and professional organisation to stand up for their members during a pay negotiation. The Justice Secretary met with the Scottish Police Federation earlier this week or last week. It was a constructive discussion. I hope all sides will continue to work together constructively to ensure that a fair and affordable pay increase can be agreed for our police officers. Our police officers do deserve it, and we will continue to value them and give policing the priority it deserves.
The First Minister's on a different planet.
Yeah.
She's saying it was a constructive meeting between her Justice Secretary and the Federation, and the Federation said this morning that their members are now taking the most overt demonstration of action in more than 100 years. And I asked a very specific question. I asked the First Minister, and this is what I said, has the government considered the impact on frontline policing and public safety? She never even answered that. Again, it was looking at the issues elsewhere, because the government has taken its eye off the ball here. Resources are being used elsewhere. Policing and justice is clearly not a priority anymore. And we can see the impact on public safety. Violent crime has risen to the highest ever level since Nicola Sturgeon became First Minister. That is a consequence of a distracted government, a government that doesn't focus on what really matters. It's what happens when the country's top priorities are set aside, when campaigning is put ahead of governing. First Minister, surely it's time for you to fully focus on supporting our police officers and keeping our streets safe and free of crime.
First Minister.
To run through these key points, Presiding Officer. Firstly, on the impact of the SPF action, of course that's an operational matter for the Chief Constable, and I would have thought Douglas Ross might know that the Chief Constable has advised.
Members, thank you. We would all like to hear the response. Thank you.
That the action can be effectively managed in the short term via Police Scotland's operational capacity and resilience subgroup. Secondly, I would have thought any reasonable person would have welcomed that constructive pay negotiations are ongoing. I appreciate that is not the way Tories go about things with public sector workers. They just offer them zero and tell them to go away. We sit down and have constructive pay negotiations. And lastly, Presiding Officer, on crime levels, the crime levels in this country are at their lowest level since, I think, 1974, and that is partly because...
First Minister, members, I cannot hear the First Minister, therefore I can only assume that other people cannot hear, and I'd be grateful if we could hear the First Minister. Thank you.
The Conservatives don't want people to hear the answers, Presiding Officer, because the answers don't suit the narrative of the Scottish Conservatives. That is the reality. Crime levels at amongst their lowest level since 1974, partly because of the value that we attach to policing, but more than that, Presiding Officer, due to the great work that our police officers and their support staff do, which is why we will continue to support them, in stark contrast to that part of the UK where the Conservatives are in government.